King Grayskull. A character who, while not as maybe well known as He-Man, has become a huge part of the franchise and has been around from the beginning, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Well, yeah. I mean, the very first mini-comic was called King of Castle Grayskull, and we got images of it of the previous king from centuries ago, both as a spirit that guarded the castle and in a sort of flashbacky-ish, an actual image of a flesh and blood king, which we actually used that image on the King Grayskull flesh and blood representation action figure. So it was a cool way to link the version that was created for the Mike Young show, which is the one you see here that most people know, all the way back to the original mini-comics. So yeah, he's a really important character, and he's only become more important in the fact that he's appeared now in both both Netflix shows, actually. So yeah, and it was great to do the very first action figure of him and actually do quite a few variants of King Grayskull in the Classics line. Now, one thing to address, because this comes up every time we talk about a 2000X designed character, we weren't going to do them in the scale of 2000X, where, like Battle Lion would have been huge. The idea was to do the scale of the original 82 line, but incorporate characters like King Grayskull from the 2000X or from the mini-comics, because ideally they're the same character. They just, weren't created by the same people. It's craziness. Anyway, the point being is we kicked off the entire Classics line with the initial King Grayskull figure. You can go watch the original video for more about that, going back to actually probably the first video for this whole series. But, it felt like a really good way to start a new He-Man line without doing He-Man first and doing something exciting for Comic-Con. So while he came in both Flesh and Blood and Stone variants, I think it was 1 in 12 or 1 in 10 was the Stone version, which was only available at the show. This was actually, I was trying so hard to involve the fan community, specifically He-Man.org, really wanted to be involved, so I called them and asked them, hey, what kind of variant could we do? And they suggested a statue based on the image of the statue from the episode 35. I kind of got my hand slapped later on because you're not supposed to work directly with fans to develop product because of legal reasons. I mean, not that, the He-Man.org guys are going to come sue Mattel for not giving them credit for suggesting the statue version, but you could understand the door it opens. It's the problem. It's so hard. We want to involve the fans, but you can't. All right, legally. So, statue at the show, and you could get the statue variant. That's kind of the story behind the original King Grayskull figure. What about the Spirit? Well, the Spirit actually started with this original figure, which is why I'm going over it, because there was a third variant, which was the Spirit of King Grayskull, which is this one here. Now, there were 31 of them made, and they were all distributed. They were basically done as kind of a thank you gift to upper management for letting us do this line. One was auctioned off at Comic-Con, one sold at Dream Halloween, or auctioned at Dream Halloween to raise money for charity, for children affected by AIDS, which was Mattel's charity back then. And then the rest were distributed internally, and I kept the loose one, the 31. We had 30 packaged ones and one loose one. So anytime you see a loose image, that's mine, because mine was I took the one without the package, because I wanted to make sure, the team got one. All right, so now it came time to doing a second King Grayskull, and we'll get back to the Spirit, because that's what we're talking about now, the third one. The second one was done because since the first figure was released at Comic-Con, and again, as I noted, he's a very key character, there was a lot of demand to re-release him, and we wanted to make sure we made the re-release special enough so fans didn't feel like they were just buying the same figure again. Very deliberately giving him really cool accessories that helped story tell, showing the transfer of the power from the orb into the sword, or vice versa, from the sword into the orb, excuse me. I should know my lore, I wrote it. All right, enough about the background of King Grayskull. Let's get back to the Spirit version. Now, we know fans obviously wanted this figure. There were customs showing up of what, what it could have looked like in the vintage line. Luckily, we had a slot that we could do this in because of the success of the Spirit of Hordak figure the previous year. So, quick background, this was a chase figure, an online chase figure, where you never knew where it was when it was going to show up to buy. This was something we did deliberately by request of upper management. They wanted to recreate the emotional thrill of the toy hunt and finding a variant at retail, like with those old Toy Biz Marvel Legends. So this was our attempt to follow those marching orders and create that experience. You can go see the video I did on Spirit of Hordak for all of the background and fallout and celebration and etc. of him. All right, so that slot allowed us to anniversary that slot for King Grayskull and do a spirit version. Now, the question of doing the exact version we did previously where we raised money for children affected by AIDS, the idea was to try to do something different. And so looking at the original version, which was white, we talked about, oh, well, what if we did it in white? What if we just did a clear version in order to differentiate it? I actually got the idea from a clear Orco that I had sitting on my desk for years. All right, so Brandon Sapinski was the designer of this one. I remember when I proposed the clear, he said, let me try something a little different. And he came back and surprised me with this glow-in-the-dark sample. I was like, oh, that's awesome, because, ghosts should glow in the dark. And it fulfilled sort of all of the needs where it differentiated the figure from the original Spirit release, it gave fans access to a Spirit figure, and it also differentiated from the previous classic releases. And I think, looking at all the Spirit figures and the prototype clear one, I'm glad we went with Brandon because I think it pops a lot more. You really do get lost in an all-white figure. I mean, and he did a really nice wash as well on the loincloth, so he really does pop in package, and we use that original artwork of the Spirit from the mini comics in the name to, again, link that together. I do wish we'd gotten to an actual Spirit form that could have been attached on top of the castle. This is something fans have done customs of. It showed up in the Origins line at PowerCon, which I thought was so cool. This was amazing. I would have bought this if it was at a store. Unfortunately, I couldn't be at PowerCon, but that's not important right now. So yeah, this was something that would have been really cool to also connect that Spirit of Castle Grayskull to the new Spirit of Castle Grayskull, but unfortunately just became a bridge too far. But hey, we did an awesome glow-in-the-dark figure, and if, there's anything that says coolness, it's glow-in-the-dark figures. While it was also a chase figure, and you had to be there when he went on sale, and I know it was not every fan's cup of tea, it satisfied upper management's request for this, and it opened up a slot. If we didn't have that request from upper management, we wouldn't have had a slot to do this figure. And while it's not an exact recreation of the one that was done for charity, it gives fans a Spirit figure that's also different from the previous two and looks great on shelf.